You click the launch meeting part or what? Eat the pain, no?
Hey, Jerry, like your beard.
Thank you. It'll be off in January.
I
Oh, what's his name's growing a beard? Mayor. Where's the audio?
Here. I'll distract your mind. Who's that?
Jack, wait.
Christopher. Can you scoot over maybe so you don't have to lean over so much? Bruder. Kate Medicus, Barber,
They're at the
Jeff
actual
Pepper.
site.
Can I ask everyone to mute their mic for now, please?
Huh? Oh.
enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue. Please enter the meeting password followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter the meeting password followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter the meeting password followed by pound. You are in the meeting now. There are more than 20 participants in the meeting. You have been added to the waiting room. You cannot talk or listen until the host admits you to the meeting.
Mm-mm. We're past the deadline. I mean, there's so many. We have the whole board present. And we've got Dan Berkey's for CBS. And we need, got one for Clayton. Van Hoos. So we do have a representative for all three. That's good. Should I tell Amanda?
Mrs. Sewell, is all the staff present?
Yes, we were actually just verifying, and we also have a representative for all three cases logged in.
Okay. All right, we will get started then. I'm going to be calling to order the Planning Commission meeting for tonight, which is November 17th, 2020 at 7:00 p.m. Roll call, please.
Ms. Edwards,
Present.
Mr. Pano,
Present.
Mr. Clapper,
Present.
Mr. Bruder, he's connecting. It looks like he got disconnected. Madam Chair, he's reconnecting now.
Okay.
Mr. Clevenger Morris,
Okay. All commissioners are present this evening. The Planning Commission operates in accordance with the provisions of the Kent City Charter, the Kent Zoning Code and Subdivision Regulations, all of which establish the powers and duties of the Commission. Members of the Planning Commission are appointed by Kent City Council and serve without compensation. Certain cases such as conditional zoning certificates, special zoning permits, overlay district projects, and zoning amendments require public hearings before the Planning Commission. During the public hearing, any person wishing to address their concerns to the Commission will be provided the opportunity. Once the public hearing is closed, it shall be to the discretion of the chair whether to allow additional public comment. Cases such as site plan reviews and subdivision projects do not require a public hearing. However, the chair will allow public comment on each case as it is taken on the agenda. In each instance where the Commission receives public comment or conducts a public hearing, those persons wishing to address their concerns to the Commission will be required to do so under oath or positive affirmation. The oath or affirmation shall be administered to all who wish to speak at the beginning of the Planning Commission meeting. Once a decision has been made by the Planning Commission on a case, the case is closed for the Commission as there is no provision to reopen a case. With the exception of cases falling under the Subdivision Code, any decision of the Planning Commission may be appealed to the City's Board of Zoning Appeals in accordance to Chapter 1109 of the Zoning Code. Anyone interested in appealing a decision of the Planning Commission is advised to seek private legal counsel. Mr. Fink, would you please administer the oath?
At this time, any witnesses who are going to testify or speak before the Planning Commission, do please raise your right hand and Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give before the Planning Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please respond with I do.
I do.
And since we have so many people here present today, if you would please, after you state your name and address for the record, please also identify if you were placed under oath so that we have a clear record for posterity. Thank you.
Moving on to additional correspondence this evening. Commissioners received several pieces of correspondence. We had one piece of correspondence in regards to case PC 20-016, which is the 772 West Main Street home occupation. We had one correspondence that was in favor of the request. Also, for PC 20-016, which is 772 West Main Street's home occupation, we had 83 pieces of correspondence that were not in favor of the application. These are all on file at the Community Development Department. I'm not going to go through and read all 84 names that the correspondence came from. Some individuals sent multiple pieces of correspondence. Other correspondence had multiple names on them. So that's not necessarily the exact number of people, but just rather individual pieces of correspondence. Just a brief summary of the correspondence that was not in favor of the application. I basically took the main concerns and parsoned them out. So we had 17 individuals concerned about parking, 13 concerns about security, 1 concern about bike lanes, 17 concerns about traffic, 26 concerns about the proximity to schools, 42 concerns about public safety and being hazardous to the neighborhood, 68 concerns that were opposed to a firearms business specifically in a residential district, 16 concerns about property values, and 10 concerns of the type of clientele coming into the neighborhood. Have all commissioners had adequate time to review all of the additional correspondence?
Yes.
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 All right. Moving on, we have no old business, so we will go straight to new business. Our first case is PC 20-001. This is Claiborne Ford's proposed site plan. This is for the 1035 West Main Street parcel, and the applicant is seeking a conditional zoning certificate and site plan review to reconfigure the parking lot. The subject property is ICR Intensive Commercial Residential Zoning District. Would staff please review the report?
Yes, thank you. A number of years ago, Claiborne bought the old Huntington Bank building. They were going to use it as a sales office, but it wasn't conducive for that use, so they discontinued it. Can I ask everyone to mute their microphone, please, unless you're speaking? I can mute them all. Yeah. So the area where the Huntington Bank building, formerly the Huntington Bank building, was demolished, they converted that into parking. And they've also rearranged the parking towards the front of the building to make it easier for entrance into the building, and especially for the accessibility of the handicapped spaces. While we were reviewing this, it's been here in the office for quite a while. It came to our attention that the bike and hike path that's supposed to connect along the frontage of this property, this was a good time to actually have that installed too. So we have been working in an agreement with Claiborne to have the actual bike and hike portion in front of this property installed. That's part of the reason why it's been delayed so long. But it looks like the agreement is going to council, so we're good there. Automotive sales and service is a conditionally permitted use in the ICR zoning district. I have listed the conditions in your staff report. We believe they have all been met or are grandfathered in. You can enter the property from West Main Street. The drive aprons are actually being altered slightly to fit with the new configuration of the parking spaces. Utilities, stormwater are existing, and there's really no changes for that. They have a couple of signs that they have to relocate because the ingress egress is being modified. Lighting and the dumpster are staying where they are. They are going to put new lights up, but they'd already done a permit for that previously. And let's see, landscaping, you have a landscape plan. They are adding 20 shrubs and 14 pine trees, which will be nice. It'll complement the landscaping that's already in front of the Lincoln dealership. The Architectural Review Board, it wasn't required to review this project since there was no building involved and there were no variances required. I did want to point out what the landscaping, part of what they've done is try to delineate the bike and hike path versus their parking lot. So there's some hardscape that's going in there too. And that's what I have. I have a motion there if you wish to approve it. And we suggest a technical plan review and the execution of the shared use path development agreement be conditions of approval should you wish to approve it.
Thank you, Ms. Barone. Anything else from city staff?
No, thank you.
No.
Okay. And is the applicant here this evening to present? If you could unmute, state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, this is Mike Van Hoos with the Claiborne Auto Stores from 1085 West Main Street here in Kent.
All right, and if you would just like to go over your project this evening.
I think, Jennifer, thank you, covered it very well. All the points are laid out. I really have nothing to add as far as what the plan is. The point or two that I would like to make is that we truly looked at this. Do we have an option to repurpose that building so that it made sense from a business standpoint? But when we took everything into consideration, including the fact that it was surrounded by asphalt on 3 sides, well, actually surrounded by asphalt on 4 sides, with one side of it being just a drive-through type access. And then considering that there was some vandalism issues in the past and some illicit activities in the past, it just became clear that our best option was truly to just increase the parking. And that was our motivation to do that. Other than that, that's all I have, other than what was already presented.
All right, thank you. All right, commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant or staff before we move on? Mr. Pano?
Yes, I have a question. It's maybe silly, but what's the parking going to be used for? Is it just for storage of cars, or is it for, what's the purpose of all the parking?
Yeah, the parking is actually customer parking.
Customer
It's
parking.
Customer vehicles that we repair, work on, also employees. It's not new car inventory, certainly, that's already in another section on the campus. It's employee and customer parking.
Okay. And I guess since I'm, is there a little bit more information about what type of plants you may be planting other than junipers, spirea, and pine? They're kind of generic. Does anyone know what type of planting it might be?
Not at this time.
No, not at this time. I'll certainly enlist the help of plant experts before we make that decision.
Okay.
You were after a variance in texture and height.
What's that?
I'm sorry, I have Dow Jaffrey with me as well in the office. You just can't see him, but go ahead, Dow.
We met with the landscape architect and we told him we wanted a variance between the height and texture and color And that's what he came back with. He said that would give you some height and, light green, dark green, maybe a blue spruce, that type of a thing. Which will actually, in a way, will hide the parking, but it also creates the northern barrier for the bike path.
Okay, so you are planning on adding height to this
Yes.
landscaping?
Yes.
That was that was mainly my point, because some, spirea can be 8 inches high, or
Yeah.
it can be all
No,
different types. Same with the junipers.
Well, the planting areas are going to be curbed and they'll be mounded in that area. So that'll give you some height there, but then the vegetation itself will be taller.
Well, the Lincoln dealership looks beautiful. I wish everything on West Main looked like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could we just clarify for the record, Mr. Jaffrey, were you sworn in?
Yes, I raised my hand and I just wasn't on camera.
Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are
Amanda,
there any other
I'm
commissioners?
done.
I do have a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. Mr. Clapper?
Also regarding the landscaping, I think that, and probably through technical plan review and when you work with your landscape architect, to make sure that it's friendly to bikes and pedestrians, as we are putting a bike path there. So there is good visibility for cars exiting the parking lot, I would think, more so than entering. So they have clear view of any pedestrians or bikes that are on the bike path. And is there any kind of caution or any kind of signage we would want for the bike path, or is that something that would be addressed down the road maybe in the area, or is that something we don't need to worry about at this point?
You don't need to worry at this point. It'll be part of the agreement with Clavin and the engineering division who does the bike and hike paths.
Okay.
Mr. Clapper? Mr. Clevenger Morris?
No.
Mr. Bruder, any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to commend the Clavin team for cooperating with the city. That pedestrian biking experience along that section of Main Street has been needing this kind of attention for a long time. So I just want to express my appreciation to them.
Thank you.
I have just a couple questions. I saw on the application that this is broken down into phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Do you have an estimated timeline on these phases?
Yeah, the construction will take, this is Mr. Jaffrey again, it'll take about 2 months because we have to do it in steps so that they continue to have access into the site. It'll be a 2-month. I doubt whether they're going to be able to do it this fall due to the fact that the weather's setting in. The intent was, as our backup plan was to start in March and be done in May 1st.
Okay. Thank you. And then my other question was, in the staff report, it says that there's going to be several parking lot islands that will have landscaping. And as I looked at the blueprints, I had a little bit of difficulty following along. Are there actual islands, and where are they located?
The final drawing is a landscape plan,
Right.
the colored drawing. Those are immediately to the north of the bike path along 59.
Okay. So that's the landscape up on the front of the property, but there's not
Right.
actual islands in the parking lot.
No,
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that,
those islands that are shown in the parking lot are just striping only.
okay. Thank you. Those are the only questions that I had. So we'll move on to public comment. Would anyone in the public like to address the site plan this evening? If so, please raise your hand. Okay. Hearing and seeing none, we will move forward to Planning Commission discussion. Mr. Clevenger Morris, would you like to start?
I mean, I can, but there's not much for me to say. I think this looks pretty straightforward. I am really excited to see some revitalization to the hike and bike trails. So this is just a thumbs up for me.
Okay. Mr. Bruder?
I don't have anything more to add. Thank you.
Mr. Pena?
All my questions were answered. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Clapper?
Nothing more from me.
Okay, nothing from me either. Is there a motion on the table?
I move that in case PC 20-001, the Planning Commission approve the conditional zoning certificate and site plan to reconfigure the parking lot at 1035 West Main Street, subject to the following two conditions: technical plan review and the execution of the shared use path development agreement.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. Moving on to case PC 20-018. This is the CVS Health Hub exterior sign rebranding project. Location is 500 South Water Street. The applicant is seeking approval of a revised comprehensive sign plan for the Health Hub rebranding project. This property is RC High Density Multifamily Commercial District. Would staff like to review, please?
Yes, thank you. So CVS is going through a rebranding of their stores for the stores that are becoming Health Hub. And as part of that, they are changing their signs to have little hearts by the CVS and then adding signs that say Health Hub on them. CVS already has a comprehensive sign plan, so they are before you to modify the comprehensive sign plan to add these hearts and the little Health Hub signs. They are also changing the sign, the monument sign in front of the building. They are taking away the electronic part of it and making it the standard sign then for the Health Hub. The comprehensive sign plan standards are in your staff report. The Architectural Review Board considered this request November 3rd, 2020, and recommended the Planning Commission approve the plan revisions as presented. Since they have a comprehensive sign plan, variances from the Board of Zoning Appeals are not required. So should the Planning Commission wish to approve it, there is a motion you may use to approve this, and we recommend it be subject to technical plan review.
Thank you, Ms. Brune. Anything else from city staff?
I would just like to make a statement for the record. As part of the initial marketing, they did have feather signs installed, the temporary signs, and the marketing firm was notified that those would have to be removed, and they were removed promptly and would not be considered signs that would be part of the process. I had several calls about those signs, so I just wanted to clarify for the record they would not be part of this change.
Thank you, Ms. Dussel. Is the applicant here to present this evening?
Yes.
Hello, if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Dan Berkey with Archer Sign, 1917 Henry Avenue, Southwest Canton, Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Berkey. Would you like to present your case?
CVS is going through a nationwide remodel of their stores, updating all their signage to add the Heart CVS Pharmacy to them. Certain locations are getting the Health Hub signs as they're trying to help out communities that they see there's a need to help out the communities with their health hubs, which are allowing for community rooms, expanded healthcare services for people if they need them, and for easier access to, pharmacy and your healthcare for diabetes and different things all in one location. Other than that, previous explanation is good for me.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Berkey.
Yep.
Are there any commissioners who have specific questions for the applicant or staff? Hearing and seeing none, I will move on to public comment. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make comments on this case? Also hearing and seeing none, we will move on to Planning Commission discussion. Mr. Clapper?
Nothing for me. I think the aside from the fixed sign rather than the digital monument sign would be an improvement to 43.
Mr. Clevenger Morris?
Mr. Clapper beat me to it. Essentially, we've been working through the, revision process for the zoning code to try to eliminate any additional electronic signs. And if there's an opportunity to also take away an electronic sign, and we're agreeable on that, I would love to see that happen. I am very much in favor of what they presented.
Mr. Bruder?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
All right. I as well, the signs are, I'm okay with them. It's just replacing what we already have basically, but removing that electronic sign, I was very pleased to see. So I'm also happy about that and have no further questions. Is there a motion on the table?
I move that in case PC 20-018, the Planning Commission approve the revised CVS comprehensive sign plan to include a heart on the 2 CVS pharmacy wall signs, add 2 health hub wall signs, and add the heart and health hub to the monument side, subject to the following conditions. Technical plan review.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. Okay, moving on to case PC 20-016, West Arms FFL LLC, 772 West Main Street. The applicant is seeking a conditional zoning certificate and site plan review and approval for a home occupation to operate a firearms business. The subject property is R4 Multifamily Residential District. Would staff like to introduce this project, please?
Yes, thank you. The applicant is seeking approval of a home occupation to operate a firearms business called West Arms FFL LLC in her home. This is one unit of a duplex, and she does own the building. The firearms are ordered via the internet, and once they're received, the applicant performs the background check and makes appointments to meet with the clients to transfer the firearms. The firearms will be stored in a safe in the basement, and the sales transaction will take place in the kitchen. Please note that sales location has changed from what was stated in the cover letter. The proposed hours of the business will be weekday evenings between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. and on weekends. All transactions are going to be by appointment only. The applicant is the only person that will be working for this business. And she will have to get approval by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to get the federal firearms license. Home occupations are conditionally permitted uses in the R4, and I have listed the condition, which was condition 19 in your staff report. Staff is recommending that the dwelling unit being used for this, should you approve it, be inspected by the chief building official and the fire prevention officer as a condition of approval to make sure that they are up to code. For parking, they're parking in the back of the building. They come in off of West Main Street. The required parking is 4 spaces, 2 for each of the duplexes. The applicant is proposing to park 2 vehicles for the residents where the home occupation is being proposed behind one another. We've called that stacking, to allow the other parking space for a client to come in. The zoning code says the ingress egress has to be left open so that you're not prohibiting the movement of vehicles. Staff tries to do the same thing for a parking space, although that is not specifically stated in the code. But we discourage people from stacking parking spaces because it makes it hard to maneuver the vehicles. There's no change in the utility or the stormwater. There's no signs being proposed. There's no changes to the outside lighting, landscaping, nor the trash receptacle locations. The Architectural Review Board was not required to review this project, and there were no variants required. So we are going to, there are two proposed motions, one for denial and one for approval, depending on how you determine.
Can you guys hear me?
I'm sorry?
Hi, I'm Sandy Malucci. We just joined the meeting. We got.
Can you please
computer
mute your
issues.
microphone? Can you please mute your microphone? We are in the middle of presenting the case. We have not called the public yet.
Okay. Thank you.
So if the commission determines that it is an approvable case, staff is suggesting 3 conditions: 1, for technical plan review; 2, the inspection by the fire prevention officer and the chief building official; and 3, to provide evidence that the applicant has obtained her firearms license.
Thank you, Ms. Barone. Ms. Susel or Mr. Fink, anything from the city?
No, thank you.
I do have a couple of things. First, I want to make sure that we're very clear that we're discussing a conditionally permitted use and not a variance. Also, I want to make sure that it's clear for the record that the actual nature of what the issue is, can this applicant operate a business, operate a home occupation out of their residence? The actual product they are selling is not relevant to the conversation, other than to the extent whether or not there's a violation of 19G, which is such uses should not create a nuisance by reason of noise, odor, dust, vibration, fumes, smoke, electrical interference, or other causes. Or one of the other factors that would apply for any other conditionally permitted use, which are listed out in 1107.05. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Are there any questions from commissioners specifically, or I'm sorry, moving on to the applicant? Would you like to present your case this evening? If you could state your name and address for the record.
Yes, I'm Jessica West, and I live at 772 West Main Street. I own the building, and I also reside in one half. There actually is a lot of confusion from the community about this, and I'd like to clarify before it's voted on. First of all, it's the community seems to think I want to open a gun store. And that's not the case. The verbiage that's being communicated to the community, it's incorrect and misleading. And I think that's caused a lot of the letters who are opposed to this.
Ms. West, I apologize for interrupting you. I don't mean to be rude, but I need you to start by telling us that you were placed under oath, just to make sure we're clear for the record.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought I saw your hand go up before, but I wasn't sure, and that's why I got asked.
I probably could miss it. So my business is not focused on firearm sales. Face-to-face firearm sales in Ohio is actually already legal. You don't need a permit for that. So my business is focusing on background checks through the ATF. So like you said before, when firearms are purchased online, it's not legal to have them shipped to your house. You have to get it shipped to an FFL dealer. So the gun is then shipped to that location using adult signature only shipment. It's not left on the doorstep. So I receive the firearms, I contact the customer to let them know I have it, and we make an appointment to come pick it up, one person at a time by appointment only. So they fill out the paperwork and I do the background check. And the firearm does not leave the safe until it's approved. Then they leave with the unloaded firearm. So it works just like a gun shop, but without all the bulk inventory and traffic. So it's actually safer and more discreet. And I also kind of partitioned out the letters just to go through them briefly, if that's okay.
Can you talk a little bit about for people that might not know what your hours of operation are or anything that you want to tell about your project in general. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll open up public comment and we can talk about public comment, and then you'll have a chance to then address any of the concerns that you want to clarify.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yes. It's just going to be one person at a time by appointment only between 6 and 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and maybe 1 or 2 appointments over the weekend.
Do you want to talk a little bit about where the transactions will be taking place and kind of how some of the things that are in your letter that people from the public might not have been able to see your letter to understand what you're doing?
Okay. So they will come park in the back. I have actually 3. It's going to be 3 eventually, but I have 2 unstacked parking spaces right now that are my own personal visitor parking places. So they come in my back door and they sit in the kitchen and I run the background check. And then if they pass, I retrieve the gun out of the safe and give it to them.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Do any planning commissioners have questions for the applicant or for staff before we go to public comment and discussion?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to determine who's speaking. Mr. Bruder?
Sorry.
Mr. Clevenger Morris?
I'll let Chris go.
I was unmuting to say the same thing about Michael. So I have a couple of questions for both sides. First, for the staff, I wanted to address some questions based off of some of the comments we had received from the public. We had reviewed previously. We received a letter from Mr. Jones that referenced protected bike lanes and an ongoing issue with traffic and parking on the street that's interrupting those bike lanes. I wanted to know if this was something that could exacerbate that issue with additional traffic and parking in and out of the area. I also wanted to ask if the applicant was required to meet ADA compliance. I noticed in the letter that the applicant referenced that if anyone used a wheelchair, they would meet them in their car. So I wanted to know what the requirements were to be ADA compliant.
We're figuring out who can respond to what, but for the ADA compliance, that would be the reason why the chief building official would need it. The issue of access for persons with disabilities would need to be addressed for the home occupation, and the chief building official who applies the Ohio Building Code would speak to that requirement as part of that inspection. With regards to the parking, I'll let Jen speak to that.
Well, the parking is on the property. I don't believe you're allowed to park on that section of West Main Street, especially bike lanes. So I have also read these letters and seen that there seems to be an issue. That would be a police matter. But for this particular business, there would not be parking on West Main Street. It would have to be on the parcel.
Right, all my parking would be in the back. There would be no parking on any street or bike lanes.
That actually helps me go right into my questions for the applicant. I have some confusion. I was looking at the map and I was looking at the overhead satellite view of your property and the drive that comes in. I had looked at the parking spaces next to the duplex there, and it looks like you share a driveway with 772 and 772, 774, 776 altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
We do share a driveway, but we have our own personal spaces that are.
Right. So in one of the correspondences that the planning commissioners received, I'm actually just going to quote from the correspondence here. It says, Jessica West offers in her social media comments that she has ample parking On the evening of Tuesday, 11/10/2020, there were several vehicles that parked on Forest Drive. I observed people walking to this residence located at 772 Main Street, West Main Street. Whether they were visitors for the other unit or for the West residence, I do not know. However, I make the point that she may have good intentions about the parking. I can only anticipate problems with parking since I observed this traffic and parking issue firsthand. You know, according to the correspondence that we had received, you know, there's already an issue with parking backing up. And if you have someone, I appreciate that you have, as you had referred to it, as extra parking, but is there someone on the other side of your duplex, or is it currently vacant? Because if they happen to have visitors, or if your neighbors have visitors that park in there, what's going to, you know, prevent traffic from backing up if they already have visitors and you have clients? Or the reverse of that, if you have clients taking up those spots and the neighborhood residents are attempting to have visitors, is it going to prevent them from doing so?
Okay, I can clarify that. Again, I'm only going to have one client here at a time, and there is visitors parking designated for them. People are parking on Forest Drive and walking here. That is completely irrelevant because there's legal parking on Forest Drive. I happen to know that that was my tenants. They were having a small get together, and that was their friends. So yeah, when I do have family gatherings, I tell people to park where it's legal to park and not in front of my house.
Okay. And your application also, the same question that I asked to the city, you mentioned your application, quote, if I have a disabled customer, they do not need to come out of their car, get out of their car, I will come to them. Is there a reason that you wouldn't seek to update your space to make it ADA compliant? And do you think it's appropriate to have these types of business transactions in someone's vehicle versus providing a way for them to be on the property?
It wouldn't really be feasible for me to update for something as small as this, and actually be more convenient for them to just come to their car. Because basically I would just hand them the form and they would fill it out, and I would be inside running the background check.
So you would physically carry the firearm after outside to their vehicle?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Clevenger Morris?
I'll yield for now.
Okay. Mr. Bruder, any questions before we go to discussion that you need answered?
Yeah, I have two things. One, this is probably for Jennifer. On the map that we have with the colored parcel numbers on it, it has the property on both sides of it listed as 774. And then on one of the other drawings, it's 760 for that large apartment complex. So I just want to make sure when we're referencing 774 that we are all looking at the same thing.
Yeah, that's a typo in engineering's data, and I can't change it, but I can have them change it. It is incorrect.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So yep. And I guess my question really just has to do with the shared driveway. Is there an agreement between the three properties that allow for the use of those driveways? That's part A, because 772 just doesn't have one on its frontage, it looks like, and I'm sure it's grandfathered in, but I'm wondering if there is an agreement on the deed or the titles to the houses to confirm use of that. And then the second part of that is, because this is a home business that uses that driveway from somewhere else, do those folks have to agree to it in the same way that a property owner, if this were fully a rental that was applying for a home-based business, do those other property owners have to formally agree to this because of the shared driveway?
There's two driveways that these three duplexes share on the other side of the third duplex. And there has never, ever been a problem or a backup with, even when we have large get-togethers.
Right. That's not my question. So maybe it's for Eric. Eric, because this is a shared, again, we're talking about a home-based business. And so I just want to make sure that the city is covered for these things that, this property doesn't have street frontage with a driveway. So I
It's a
just
private
wanna-
drive. The city does not involve itself in such matters.
Okay. So you're saying that a home-based business without its own driveway is permitted?
No.
We regulate parking, but not private access agreements. We actually have a project right now where the parking met the site plan review, but there is a difference between a private access agreement with adjacent property owners that is outside of the city's purview.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Clapper?
Yes, I have a question for the applicant. I'm not familiar at all with buying guns, so what is the process and why would like the option to buy it and pick it up from you be like beneficial over going to a gun store to buy it there? Like, what is the antithesis for the business? I'm just not fully understanding the process, so maybe you can enlighten me to that.
Sure. A lot of people don't want to go into a big gun store in the public and buy a firearm. There's a lot of reasons why they would rather pay a smaller price and go somewhere very private. Sometimes it's because they are city officials, judges, or maybe they're being harassed. There's a lot of reasons why people just don't want to go to a gun store. It's a lot cheaper and it's a lot more private.
Okay, and as far as availability, you would have the same availability. You have an online inventory basically, so not in the, you don't have an inventory in the store, but so people would buy it from a different provider and then you're just finishing the transaction for them. Is that how it works?
Yes, I'm charging them for the transaction of the background check.
So you're executing the background check and then you're charging them for the transaction. So you're just like a, to lack of a better term, a middleman in this case, between the dealer and the owner.
Yes.
How the process works.
But yes, the gun is already purchased and they chose to ship it to a private FFL instead of a gun store.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Mr. Rapano?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, may I interject for one moment?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that one of the commissioners mentioned that home occupations are permitted uses. They are conditionally permitted in this zoning district. So I just want to make sure and clarify for the record that it is a conditionally permitted use.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I had one more question.
Sure.
And I'm not familiar with the federal firearms license, and you do state that there's an ATF inspection. Is that a recurring inspection? Is it a one-time? How often does that occur?
There's an initial inspection and then there's, I'm not sure how often, but they come and audit all the time. They audit the books. If there's anything off in the books, your license is taken away.
Okay, I know you don't know exactly how often, but is there a time frame they have to work within? Like they might come once a year, but it has to be done within 5 years, or you don't know what that time frame would be?
I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
I believe it's quite random so that it's a surprise.
Okay.
Mr. Pena?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to continue with Jeff's line of questioning. Do you have, I guess, do you have the federal firearms license now, or is it something you have to get after you get permitted to do what you want to do, if you do?
This is something I need to get the city's permission first because it's a residential. I need to make sure my property is zoned before I then move on to apply for the FFL.
That's what this meeting's about then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just to be clear, because like Jeff, I don't know anything about guns. So people go to an online store of any sort and they can purchase a gun.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't sell them.
No.
Okay, so you're just a facilitator to make sure that the people who are purchasing these guns
Yes.
can be licensed or have the proper background checked and whatever else
You don't-
has to go on for
I don't need
that.
a permit to sell firearms. I need the permit to do the background checks from my home.
And that's what this is about.
Mhm.
Okay. So you're not going to have an online gun sale
No,
catalog or something like
No.
that. So the only guns that are coming to your residence are guns that are purchased by another entity.
right. So if somebody goes on Arms List or Bud's Gun Shop or wherever they buy a firearm, they get a drop-down list of FFLs to choose from near them. That's where it has to be shipped.
So let's play pretend. You seem to know enough about this. And if you want to do this, I mean, do you anticipate selling 3 guns a week or 20 guns a week? Or do you have an idea of the volume you may think you might be doing?
I'm projecting between 5 and 15 a week,
Okay.
at least to start.
Mr. Pano, Mr. Clapper, just to address one of the questions you both seem to be touching on. The BATF issues the license, if she gets that far, that they are permitted to do random inspections during the lifetime of that, depending on what type of class permit she acquires, it affects how much the permit costs, and it only lasts for 3 years. After 3 years, she has to renew again, or any applicant would have to renew again after 3 years.
So I guess Eric and Jessica, can this permit grow into a different kind of permit where it's a gun store?
I
No,
would have to apply for a different kind of license. I'm just going for the basic FFL. I'm just selling, I would just be doing transfers of basic firearms like handguns and rifles, like the kind of that people would use for home protection or personal protection. I'm not applying for the class 3, which would be like automatic weapons and short barrel rifles that are higher up.
Okay, so Eric and I guess Jessica at the same time, my question would be, if this is approved, can it be expanded to do other things, or can it be limited to not do certain things?
It depends on what you approve. If you approve her for to operate a home occupation, she can't, pursuant to her class 1 request, it limits this. If she were to, could she then expand this to be allowed to sell relic firearms and black powder?
That's my
she could
question.
do. If she's trying to expand it into automatic weapons or actually operate a full business out of, so it's no longer a home occupation, but primarily a business, that would not meet zoning, and that would require her to come back in front of the, well, she couldn't come back. It wouldn't be a permitted use in the zoning district.
Okay, so to clarify, could you repeat that, please, Eric? Because I just want to make sure I'm clear about it.
If she could expand the use if she went from a class 1 to a class 2 license in order to be allowed to sell relic firearms or black powder weapons. If she were trying to expand to be a full gun dealership, where it became business was the primary purpose of the residence or primary use of that property, that would not be permitted under a home occupation. It would not meet zoning regulations, and she would not be permitted to do that.
Thank
To
you.
clarify, the specificity she's providing now on how the home occupation would run with regards to the number of clients, the appointment period, that specifies the conditions under which the conditionally permitted use, if approved, is set. In other words, if she goes against this, she would be in violation of that home occupation. Very similar to the physical therapist. It was an appointment only. If issues arise that was not going to occur, she would no longer be in compliance with the home occupation that was conditionally permitted by the Planning Commission a few months ago, if that helps you understand. The specificity which you assign to the motion will make sure that those parameters and limits are established.
Thank you. I think for right now, that's all I have. Thank you.
Amanda, can I ask another question?
Yeah, Mr. Bruder?
Thank you. Eric or Bridget, I was just looking in the 1119 section, the home-based businesses, and the last section is about, if something is approved, it's compliance and revocation. And it talks about how that would happen, and it would be, if the homeowner were doing something that was outside of the agreement for the home-based business, how the license could be revoked. Could you just walk folks, myself included, through that, like what that would look like, just very briefly, in case there are any issues that should arise if this were to be approved?
It is similar to what I was just trying to indicate in my statement, that the parameters that are established with regards to the stated hours of operation, limits of clients coming in, all of that specificity will establish what is the conditionally permitted home occupation. Deviations from that would allow for that revocation. So I'm going to use the physical therapist example we had last month or the month before. She was doing appointment only, and it was going to be a minimal number that the parking could be accommodated. At a point where that was no longer apparent that it was happening, we're getting reports of parking issues, things like that. She is no longer in compliance with the limited number of clients she was going to meet and the hours of operation. So that would mean that what was presented to the Planning Commission and what was authorized by the Planning Commission no longer align, which would allow us to do the investigation and determine whether or not that needed to be revoked.
And if we determine there's an issue, then city staff would put it back on the Planning Commission's agenda. The Planning Commission would conduct an evidentiary hearing and make the decision whether or not the applicant was in compliance with the home occupation or not, under 11-1906.
Okay, thank you. That was my last question, Amanda.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for staff. We're talking about one additional parking space for the clients, and it's my understanding that that's just what Ms. West is saying, because she's going to have one client at a time. Is there for a home occupation with a retail type, which I believe this is considered more of a retail line, how many spaces she needs from code?
I don't believe the code specifies how many spaces they have. It's what the client or the applicant is saying they need for their client.
Okay. And then Ms. West, just to clarify, you're not technically selling anything. You're selling your service of running the background check in order for them to obtain their pre-purchased firearm. So I'm assuming then will not have ammunition that you'll be selling or anything like that.
No, people can just order ammunition to their door. It's would be not necessary.
Okay. Are there any other questions that commissioners need answered from the applicant or staff before we move on?
I do.
I have some follow-up.
Mr. Clapper?
Ms. West, in your letter, you have, you state that your husband will be designated as a, quote, responsible person. What is the function of a responsible person on the FFL application?
He can basically help me make business decisions. He will be doing, he can basically help me do anything except with the logbook. I'll be doing the background checks and logging it in the book.
Okay, and then I had a question for staff to follow up on the last parking question. We were talking about the minimum for retail space. There is a minimum set forth for the occupancy of the residents of the building, correct?
There's a maximum.
A maximum set forth, okay, which is?
1/3.
1/3, okay, thank you.
Oh, wait. I might be remembering wrong.
We're going to look it up. We think it's a quarter, right?
Yeah.
Hold on, we're looking it up in the, we remember a lot of the zoning code, but not all the parking.
Okay.
Or no, yeah,
Here.
1/4, yeah.
Yeah, it's 1/4.
1/4 under 11-1905C. My apologies. Thank you, Jennifer, for catching that right away.
Thank you.
Amanda, I also have follow-up.
Mr. Clevenger Morris?
I have a question for staff, but I'm going to ask a question to the applicant first. Ms. West, you had mentioned earlier that you expected to do, at least in the beginning, probably 5 to 15 of these transactions. So someone would purchase a firearm online. I assume the firearm gets mailed to you or delivered to you somehow after you complete the background check, and then you facilitate the handoff to the person who purchased so that they're not having to go to a store like you had mentioned.
Correct.
That's correct. Okay. So you said in the beginning you'd be aiming toward 5 to 15 a week. How many of these transactions do you believe that you would at peak be able to facilitate in a given week?
Probably about 25 max.
25. And how long, if someone has gone online and they've completed this process and they've sent you the firearm, how long do you hold on to that? How long do they have to come pick it up?
There's no time frame.
So you could indefinitely hold a firearm for someone?
Correct.
So in any given week, in the beginning, you would be looking at 5 to 15 firearms in a safe, with the option of getting up to 25 in a safe. And if people didn't show up in their time slot, you could be looking at a buildup of firearms. There's no cap on the number of firearms that could be in the home based off of the guidelines for the FFS?
No.
Okay. Thank you. That's my only question for you. And for staff, before we go into public comment, could you please remind us what the conditions are that have to be met for this?
First, under 1171.
Okay, say what they explain. Just to clarify for the audience, we will be reading these sections, but this is a conditionally permitted use. So what the assistant law director is going to read are the conditions specific to a conditionally permitted use of a home occupation. These are all also subject to conditional zoning review as a basis of determination. There's 6 general standards. So those will be read from another chapter, 1107 next.
And for commissioners, Mr. Fink will review them now, but we'll do it again. I'll go through one by one in discussion so we can hit on every point.
Excellent, good idea. So under 1171.0119, for a home occupational, this would be a condition permitted use in an R4 zoning district. It's subject to the following conditions. Such use shall be conducted entirely within the dwelling unit, and no use of any accessory building or yard space shall be permitted. B, such use shall be clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling for dwelling purposes. C, such use shall be conducted only by persons residing in the dwelling unit and not more than one other person. D, there shall be no display nor stock in trade nor commodities sold except those which are produced on the premises.
Can I clarify here? I'd like to clarify on this item D, because I did receive several questions on it, because it speaks to except those which are produced on the premises. It has been the practice for home occupations to include also anyone that acts as a mediary or a broker. For example, an eBay business. We don't do a strict application of it actually being created or produced on site. If you are bringing the product in and then distributing it out to someone different, we would consider that being met.
E, the use shall not involve the use of more than 33 1/3% of the floor area of only one story. Notice that that's in conflict with another standard, which requires it to be limited to 25% of the floor space. And because this is a duplex, it would only be 25% of the half that Ms. West resides in. And because there's a conflict in the code, we are required to use the stricter standard. F, one unlighted nameplate, not more than 1 square foot in area, announcing the name of the home occupation shall be permitted. G, such uses shall not create a nuisance by reason of noise, odor, dust, vibration, fumes, smoke, electrical interference, or other causes. Separate from that, we have the 110705 basis of determination, which applies to all conditionally permitted uses. Under this ordinance, the Planning Commission shall review the particular facts and circumstances of each proposed use in terms of the following standards and shall find that such use of the proposed location, 1, shall be harmonious with and in accordance with the general objectives or with any specific objective of the land use and thoroughfare plan or comprehensive development plan of current adoption. 2, shall be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained so as to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and that such use shall not change the essential character of the same area. 3, shall not be hazardous or disturbing to existing or future neighboring uses. 4, shall not be detrimental to property in the immediate vicinity or to the community as a whole. 5, shall be served adequately by essential public facilities and services such as highways, streets, police and fire protection, drainage structures, or that the persons or agencies responsible for the establishment of such use shall be able to provide adequately any such service, including refuse disposal. And 6, shall have vehicular approaches to the property, which shall be so designed as not to create an interference with traffic on surrounding public streets or roads.
Are there any other questions from commissioners before we move on?
Yeah, I had one, maybe two more for the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Clapper.
Just to be clear, so somebody buys the gun before passing the background check, and then you're responsible for doing the background check, making sure they pass it, then passing the gun on to them, correct?
Correct.
What happens if they don't pass the background check?
Then the firearm does not leave my safe.
Then what happens to the firearm?
It gets returned.
Okay.
I return it to where it came from, to the store.
Okay, so you return that to the store, the customer's already paid for that. So is there something set up in the supply chain that allows that, like when they ship you the gun, is there return processes already in place, already laid out that says, okay, if this customer doesn't receive this gun, I'm sure it's very stringent the whole way down the line. So when it gets to you, you end up with this. So I'm sure it's not a very uncommon occurrence that this has to go back. So is there already something in place where you get this back to the supplier? Like, do they send it with return shipping, or is that on you to track down? Is that inventory sitting around? Like, what, just walk me through what would happen there.
The address would be on the box where I would return it to. It would just be like a normal return. I would just return to sender.
So there's already not something in place that if they ship this gun, they know they're shipping it to you, a licensed firearm dealer. What kind of notification do you get once that's on its way to you?
I would probably just get an email letting me know it's coming from wherever they bought it from.
From the supplier, and then,
yes.
Okay. And this would just be purely opinion based. And I would ask you, because you're more familiar with buying firearms than I am. If you were to have a firearm shipped to you and somebody wasn't able to pass the background check, what do you think their general reaction would be towards that?
They would probably be surprised, because I don't think they would purchase the firearm without confidence that they were going to pass the background check.
Okay.
Sometimes there's just delays because their name or social security is very close to somebody who cannot have a firearm. So it takes a couple days to clear up. That actually happens a lot. But I'm sure these people will be very surprised if they failed the background check after they attempted to purchase a firearm.
And then what is the stringency as far as like proof of identification for the background check? Like what are they providing you with as far as identity?
I would get their driver's license, and they have a whole form to fill out, and it goes into the ATF system.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we are going to move on to public comment this evening. I know that this is a very emotional topic for a lot of people, and reading through all of the correspondence we had prior to tonight, I just took some notes about just some things real quick. I just would like everyone to keep in mind that tonight's topic is germane to the site plan, the conditional zoning certificate for a home occupation. And I did want to clarify, there were a couple pieces of correspondence where there were some notes on special zoning permits and how things might not fit in there, but this is not a special zoning permit, it's a conditional permitted use. So those are two separate things. In general, with firearms being a contentious matter, I want to keep in mind that we're not here tonight to debate gun laws. We are not here to debate the Second Amendment, the mental health crisis, what someone's saying on social media. And while these topics are worthy of discussion, this just is not the correct forum to do that. We need to look at the zoning code and to see if this business fits into this city's code. And we're specifically talking about 772 West Main and not other residents within the city.
Thank you.
I ask that all speakers stay on topic and that we keep all comments germane to the site plan and to the zoning code. And I can assure you that all of the commissioners have spent hours on this case reviewing the zoning code and all of the comments. Everyone is very prepared this evening, so your concerns have been heard. So with that said, if you did submit correspondence to the Planning Commission, we have read it. There's no need to speak again unless you're welcome to if you would like to, but your concerns have been read. If another citizen or resident has already mentioned something that is a concern, again, we've heard it and we'll take it into account. You're welcome to reiterate or just say, you know, ditto, I have the same thoughts that the previous residents had. So we will take all of that into account, and we will also have a 2-minute speaking time this evening because there are a lot of people present. So we will ask you to speak for 2 minutes. Don't forget to unmute when you go to speak. You will need to state your name, address, and just confirm that you have been sworn in, you're under oath. So with that being said, would anyone from the public like to address the Planning Commission with any concerns this evening?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I actually put together a list of the Zoom meeting invitations by order of when they were received. If you'd like, I could give those names and you could ask if they're in the audience and that person could unmute to keep it a little more organized since there are so many.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep, we can do that.
Okay, the first public speaking request came from Jack Amrine.
Mr. Amrine, would you like to speak this evening?
Yes, I'm Jack Amrine. I live at 346 Majors Lane, Ohio. I'm the councilman for Ward 2. I have received countless calls.
Mr. Amrine, if you don't mind me interrupt, are you under oath?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I received countless calls from concerned citizens, largely for safety reasons, but some for fear of property, a drop in property value. And so I just wanted to make it very clear that as the councilman, I don't have any issue with someone purchasing a gun from a gun shop and having a background check, but I have issues with residential, not store. I know it's not a store, but just guns being picked up in a residential area. And that's what I have to say. So.
Thank you.
Next was Kate Medicus.
Ms. Medicus?
Hi, sorry, yes. My name's Kate Medicus. I live at 129 North Prospect Street. And yes, I am under oath. I was present during that part of the meeting.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the delivery process of the items. It's the kind of thing where an adult has to sign for it. So I'm assuming someone will be present in the house at all times when deliveries come. And then I'm curious if you could explain to us a little bit more about how the background check works. Is that something that you do online that can be done after hours in the evening? And that goes pretty quickly, like someone can wait in the kitchen while you're doing that? Those are my
It
questions.
usually takes between 15 minutes.
Ms. West, I'll go ahead, I'll go through all of the comments and concerns, and then I'll come back and ask you the questions at the end so that you can respond to everybody and everything together.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so Ms. Medicus, I can definitely get those answers for you.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
Next is Kristen Hillebrecht. She was in the meeting. I'm looking to see if she's still on the list. She seems to have logged off. Okay, so I guess we will move on. She does not seem to be logged into the meeting any longer. Next was Gretchen Rennert.
I am on the meeting. My question was
Thank you. Thank you.
My question was already asked by Mr. Clapper regarding the process if someone is denied. So I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you.
Next is Gretchen Rennert.
That was Gretchen.
I thought that was Kristen. Who just spoke? I apologize.
No, it was Gretchen Rennert. I thought you called my name. I'm sorry.
Okay. Gretchen, just to clarify, so would you just say your address for the record and that you were
Yes,
under
ma'am.
oath?
My address is 477 West Main Street, and I am under oath. The question I had has already been asked by Mr. Clapper regarding the process if someone is denied.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I believe that Ms. Hillebrecht may have just rejoined the meeting. Yes. Kristen Hillebrecht was next on the list for public comment.
Hi, this is Kristen Hillebrecht. I apologize. I got booted off the call here. A lot of my questions were answered.
Ms.
There's
Hillebrecht,
one,
can you please state your address and whether you're under oath or not?
Kristen Hillebrecht under oath. My address is 739 West Main Street.
Thank you.
Sure. When the person listed the condition specific 11.71, I think it was 019 regarding the zoning, and I only caught part of that, the part about no use of the business in the yard space. Could someone repeat that?
Certainly.
And would the exchange of the paperwork and the firearm in the driveway, would that be considered conducting business in the yard space?
1171.0119A reads, such uses shall be permitted subject to the following conditions. A, such use shall be conducted entirely within the dwelling unit, and no use of any accessory building or yard space shall be permitted. As far as what factual conclusion you draw from that, that's the role of the Planning Commission.
And Ms. Hillebrecht, we will be discussing that during Planning Commission discussion this evening.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next was David Rabin. Is David on the call? I am not seeing him in the list. David Rabin. Okay, next would be Todd Boyles.
Hi, this is Todd Boyles, 838 Bryce Road. I am under oath. Kristen basically just asked the question that I had, so I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyles.
Next is Jeff and Camille Fauser.
Hello, this is Camille Pavlicek Fauser and my husband Jeff Fauser. We live at 730 West Main Street, and we also own a home at 747 Grove Avenue. So we're property owners of two properties in the area. Specifically, I have questions, or we have questions with regard to,
Ms. Pavlicek Bowser, are you both under oath?
yes, we are. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
I
That's okay, thank you.
With regard to the number of guns that potentially will be at the premises, and Ms. West had indicated that there could be, to start, 5 to 15 guns per week, possibly up to 25. Mr. Clapper had indicated with his questioning that there could be more than that. My issue would be, at what point is there a crossover between firearm sales as a home firearm sales and a gun store? That's one question. The other question is, if the firearms are mailed or delivered to Ms. West's property, are they just placed on the front door or at the front doorstep? If there's no one there to receive them, what happens to them? We know that there have been significant problems with Amazon deliveries being lifted off people's front porches. So what happens if somebody comes and lifts a firearm off of the front porch? So that's a question also as well. And then, the guns not leaving the premises, that was an issue as well. If they're actually leaving to go out to someone who's picking up a firearm who's disabled, it would seem that that's leaving the premises. But those are the main questions that I have at this point. The other thing is that I am, in some of the reading that I have done, it's been indicated to me from the reading that oftentimes background checks don't go as smoothly as they are purported to do. And I also question, along with what was stated before, is what happens if a background check doesn't go through? Does the person leave and come back at another time, or what? I just don't think that this is in accordance with the nature of our neighborhood, and I think it would just be a tremendous detriment to the harmony of our neighborhood. That's all that I have.
Thank you, and we'll get answers to your questions.
Thank you.
Next on the list was Eric Asp.
Hi there, my name is Eric Asp. I live at 845 Bryce Road, and I heard the oath, and I'm under oath as I say this.
Thank you.
So I think I understand the process we're going through. I appreciate the rigorous process. I think it comes down to the questions of the essential character of the neighborhood, and a question about is it detrimental to the community? Those are two of the lines that I heard read. And I think just as a homeowner in the area, my guess is a lot of the emotional response, the letters you've gotten are saying, it just kind of feels scary. It feels less controlled, feels more likely to be people who would try to just fly under the radar. And so it feels like the kind of thing I don't want in my neighborhood. I just want to understand how you would speak to these fears.
All right, we will address fears during discussion. Thank you.
Next is Sandy Malucci.
Hi, this is Sandy Malucci and Tom Malucci. Just so you know that Tom's parents built these 3 beautiful duplexes.
Ms. Malucci?
Yes.
Can you state your name and address for the record and whether or not you are under oath?
Yes, I am under oath as Sandy Malucci. I live at 1014 Stewart Road, Kent, Ohio. And what my concern is, my apartment, our apartment is adjacent to the driveway going into this beautiful duplex community. It's a turnaround. There's 3 garages. There's very limited parking. So if you were able to park in your garage, the turnaround that Jessica is talking about is her way to get out of her garages, but they don't park in their garage because they have another business going on, a construction business, which their garage is full of construction items. So my concern is 5 to 15 times a week, a drop-off delivery. So will that mean Amazon? Will that mean what kind of trucks will be coming through the apartment? Shared driveways. And my other thing would be, what if they get stuck in the snow? Are they going to take care of the maintenance of the driveway? If this is a business, the hours, are they going to deliver the guns in the apartment driveway? Are they going to block West Main Street?
All right, Ms. Malucci, I could definitely ask about the delivery of those for you.
Yeah, what happens to the background check? What if they don't pass? Are we going to have angry buyers and theft on our property?
Okay. We can get those answers as well. Thank you.
I'd like to say a few things. My name is Thomas Malucci. I share ownership of 774 West Main, and I am also under oath.
Thank you.
My father built those 3 places, and I'm sure it wasn't his intent to sell firearms. I'd also want everyone to know that I'm really familiar with that property because I've been mowing the lawn ever since the 60s. Parking has always been an issue. We've tried to designate 2 parking spaces per rental. Any added traffic is just more wear and tear on what's going on down there. The only question I have is, it seems to me we're approaching this thing backwards. Shouldn't you have a background check before you're allowed to purchase a firearm? I know nothing about guns and what the policies are, and I know that's not something we necessarily want to talk about. But this whole process seems to be backwards, in my opinion. And I, for one, included with my son who lives at 774 right now, we are definitely against this. And that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Malucci.
Next is Mary Kennelly.
Sounds stupid.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sworn in. It's Mary Canale, 1123 Elno Avenue in Kent. I'd like a clarification, please, on I pulled up the city ordinances for Chapter 1171, conditionally permitted use regulations. And it states that, all structures and actual areas shall be located at least 100 feet from all property lines.
I can clarify. Chapter 1171 lists the conditions for every single use in every conditionally permitted use in every zoning district. The actual conditions that apply to a proposed use are listed with that use in the chapter. So when Assistant Law Director Fink was reading the conditions that apply to a home occupation, those are all listed under 1171.0119. So every item in that chapter does not apply to every conditional use.
Thank you. I got my
You're welcome.
Just to add to that, under 1135.02B1 is where we get the statement, home occupations are subject to 1171.0119. That's where we came up to that conclusion.
Okay, thank you. I think the other statement would be that there's been members of council, boards, commissions serving the citizens of Kent that have stated in publications, ordinances, and various communications that the responsibilities are the public safety, the public health and welfare, and peace of the community. I don't think, I'm not a neighbor, but I would not like a person selling guns or delivering guns next to me. It should be in a more secure area. We don't know what kind of safes there are, what kind of alarm systems she has. I just don't think a residence, or especially a duplex with someone living next door, would be a safe environment to have such a delivery system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Rebecca German.
If Ms. Kennelly and the Malucci's, if you could please mute your microphones. Thank you.
Hello, this is Rebecca German. I live at 176 East Main Street. I am under oath, and I believe most of my questions have been answered, but I would like to reiterate, I would like more information on the delivery and shipping and assurances about how those are handled, as well as about other safety concerns and the increased traffic within my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Elizabeth Kulata.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Kalata. I live at 338 Woodard Avenue, and I am under oath. I wanted to say, to add that I also had a question about if people who were disabled needed to pick up their guns in the yard. How did that work? How does that fit with the zoning code? So I wondered about that. I also note that my understanding is that for each of these transactions, there has to be a delivery, that is, the gun will be delivered, and someone comes to pick it up. So that each transaction requires two people to, kind of ingress and egress on the premises. So if you're talking 5 to 25 a week, that means 10 to 50 ins and outs, right, a week. To me, that is a lot of additional traffic, and I question whether or not that is good for the neighborhood. I want to say that in general, I feel that this business is not harmonious with the goal of and the essential character of the neighborhood, in part because of the increased traffic and also because of security concerns. And a question I have is whether anybody has asked the Kent City Police Department if they have a view of this. I wonder if they feel that this business will make their jobs easier or harder. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kalata.
Next, the email actually did not have a name, but it was the initials SM with an email of crrrpgn@yahoo.com. I do not see them on the list, but I did want to call them out as they had the request. Next is B. Scotia McKay. I'm not seeing them on the list either, and there's no one in the waiting room. Oh, wait, German was read, but she already spoke. Next would be Jerry Fiala.
I have nothing really to say. It's just that being the mayor of the city and living on the west side by West Main, I've heard a lot of controversial comments about it, not wanting to be in their neighborhood. And I think Jack Councilman Jack Amrine spoke as well as I could on the thing. So that's my comment, and I'm done with it.
And if we determine there's an issue, then city staff would put it back on the planning commission.
The mayor has us on YouTube as well. Next on the list is Lisa Hurt.
Yes, hello, this is Lisa Hurt. I'm at 116 North Prospect Street. I am under oath. I think all of my concerns have basically been addressed, so I don't really have any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Hurt.
And the last list for public comment is Sarah Morgan.
Hi, my name is Sarah Morgan. I live at 422 Earl Avenue, and I am under oath. Most of my concerns have been addressed. I am concerned to hear that the transaction could take place in the driveway. That does sound like it is in conflict with it needing to take place inside the dwelling. With regard to the background check, it is concerning to me that that isn't something that is done in advance, where the person who's purchasing the gun is pre-screened to basically be an approved person on the premise, that the background check could go wrong and doesn't take place until the person is there at the site is a bit concerning to me, because it does open the door for any number of people to be there at the location. I do feel strongly that it's not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. I agree with what others have said. It is a very family-friendly neighborhood. There's many small children. It's very close to Davie Elementary. There's many families in the neighborhood. There's people who come to this neighborhood because it is a safe residential neighborhood. And it doesn't feel to me that this type of sale is in keeping with that. I do understand, I don't know much about gun sales. I do understand that a person may not want to go to a store. They may want to transact privately, but I do wonder then why not have a business, have an office? Why not have an office that someone can come to? It can still be discreet and by appointment. Why must it be at a residence is kind of my main question. And I think that this type of occupation could be carried on in a different setting with the same goal that the business is striving for.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan.
That is all of the names I had on for public comment. There are some that have joined the meeting that are not referenced with regards to name or email, so you may want to do a final call for any remaining public comments, but then I think we're through the list.
Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to comment this evening? You could raise your hand. Mr. Stigati? If you could unmute your microphone.
There we go. Roger Sidoti, 1257 Elno Avenue, Councilman at Large, City of Kent. I had some questions that I thought were more pertinent than some of the questions that were asked, but there were a lot of good questions. I'm kind of curious about how many, within a 5 mile or 10 mile radius, how many people are doing this? In other words, why is this so important to have this function in the City of Kent? That would be my first question. The second question is are there going to be people traveling from other parts, other counties, traveling from near and far to come to our city, and not necessarily come to our city into our business district, but come to our city into a neighborhood to transact business? I'm curious if Jessica is an employee of the ATF, or is she an employee or is she a federal employee of some kind, or is this would this be considered that she is she an outsourced person that they bring in to do these federal these background checks? I guess the last question would be, if that's the case, then is she held accountable by the ATF for the work that she does, or who holds her accountable? As I think all those things are critical in understanding and answering the safety issues. In other words, the issues of I guess, professionalism and bringing something into a neighborhood that really doesn't quite fit. But those are my questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to address concerns? Okay, Mr. Elliott. Oh, okay, Miss Olivia.
Hi, I'm Olivia Asp. I live at 845 Bryce Road, and I am under oath. So a lot of my concerns have already been voiced. I just wanted to say that I feel like, the process of, not selling guns, but like giving out guns is detrimental to the community. And, it doesn't really go with the essential character of the neighborhood. Like Ms. Morgan was saying, that like there's a lot of kids in this neighborhood and there's schools that are nearby. I go to Kent Roosevelt High School. I feel like that's something that would be harmful. And yeah, I'm just not super comfortable with guns being given out so close to this family community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Elliott?
Hi, I'm Elliot Asp. I also live at 845 Bryce Road, and I acknowledge that I'm under oath. I just wanted to reiterate what a couple people have said, that I feel like Mrs. West has pointed out that she's made a couple efforts to make it safe, but I feel like overall, somebody facilitating guns in our neighborhood doesn't contribute to the safety of our neighborhood. If anything, I think it takes away from the safety of our neighborhood. I was also wondering about the hours of the business. I understand that there probably are some legitimate reasons, like people are off work and are able to make appointments at that time. But to me, it feels like maybe that might attract people that want to fly under the radar and meet in a private place to buy that gun in the evening when less people would see them. And I feel like I might question the reason why those people want guns, I guess, and that they're buying them in my neighborhood is a little bit concerning to me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public this evening that would like to speak?
I have a question. This is Melissa Polcha. I live at 833 Bryce Road. I am under oath.
Thank you.
And my biggest question is this a family home? Does she have children that are living in her home? Also, obviously, being a mom, I'm concerned for my own children's safety. As the AST has mentioned, we are a family neighborhood. We all look out for each other, and to have other people that we're not familiar with coming into our neighborhood where children walk around, ride their bikes is very concerning to me, as well as the neighborhood. So that's definitely a concern.
Thank you, Ms. Polcha. Is there anyone else from the public who would wish to speak this evening?
Yes, Cindy Malucci under oath. I'm just saying that we are directly next to the apartment that used to be my sister-in-law's. And what if my renters on both sides decide to move? Is that going to be, what if the people don't want to rent our apartment? Is that going to be an issue for us? Because they're against guns? I don't know. Are they going to feel safe if they move in with a child? I don't know what to say.
Thank you, Ms. Malucci.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who did not speak this evening that would like to speak before I close public comment? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, I'm going to be closing public comment for the evening. If everyone could stay on mute for the remainder of the evening, it would be appreciated. I am going to allow the applicant, well, before I do that, are there any follow-up questions for Planning Commission for the staff? And then I'll go through the comments from the public with the applicant. Is there anything that commissioners would like to ask the applicant before I start to run through those questions?
I may
None
want to
from me.
follow up after you're done, but I think maybe go ahead and run through the list.
Okay. All right, Ms. West, I saw you taking notes. I'll just run through my basic, and then if there's anything that you have jotted down that you want to address, we can do that. Some of the questions were, can you go over in detail the delivery process? I know you said that it has to be signed for with your husband on your FFL application. Is he able to sign? What kind of delivery services and where do they pull up to your residence? And if you could go into detail about that, please.
Sure. I can guarantee it's not coming from Amazon and thrown on the doorstep. It's sent through certified mail signature by an adult only, or it's returned. If FedEx were to leave a firearm on my doorstep without a signature, the ATF would be all over FedEx. Yes, my husband is allowed to sign for the packages. That's part of him being part of my business as a responsible person. What was that? Did that answer the question?
It did. And then for the certified mail with signature delivery, is that the policy of the website they're getting it from? Is that the federal policy? Who makes that policy?
I believe it's a policy of all of them. Through the ATF, it's all the shipments that's set up through the websites. All shipments that it contains.
Amanda, can I ask a follow-up with the mail?
Yes.
Ms. West, when you say it requires an adult signature, is that any adult, or does it have you and your husband's name specifically listed? So for instance, if let's say a package showed up and someone happened to be standing on your porch when FedEx drove by or the Postal Service drove by, are they looking for you and your ID, or could I sign for this package? Could anyone intercept a gun?
It can be anybody that lives at this address. Any adult.
So you're going to have to pull out your ID, and your ID is going to have to match your address, and you're going to have to show that every time?
I believe so. I'm not
Okay.
positive about that, but I know I spoke to Daryl at Rolla Farms, and apparently he's never had a package left unattended on his doorstep for 10 years. So,
Well, my question wasn't about it necessarily being unattended. I mean, I recently just moved to a different section of Kent myself, and my contractor just signed for my new iPhone 2 days ago, and it required an adult signature. And he didn't have to prove that he was me. He didn't have to prove that he lived here, and he in fact doesn't. So that's why I ask, does it physically have your name, and do you have to show your ID, or is it any adult? Could I be standing on your doorstep intercepting a package that has a firearm?
I believe with firearms, they would make sure that the person lived at this address. It's very specific shipment instructions. And I do have 3 adults living here, myself, my husband, and my 19-year-old son. So there's 3 adults living here.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make a follow-up to Chris's question. Is there a delineation between, it is a duplex, correct? Would there be a possibility of the delivery going to the incorrect side of the duplex? Is that a possibility? I'm sure there's a delineation between unit numbers, but I think it's something that we need to be concerned about, especially in this case, and given what's at hand. I just wanted to raise that point.
They wouldn't be able to accept the package because it's not their name.
So there is
Our
100%
address is
name
very
that's
verified.
required.
Our address is about, I think it's 5 times on the outside of our designating which side.
Okay, so there's a delineation between your units.
Yes, yes,
And
it's
then,
separate from yours. Mhm.
Do you know where, is there somewhere on a federal website where I could quickly search to see if there is a ID required for signature? And are all the packages sent certified mail, or are some sent through other carriers?
I believe there's 2 different carriers that they use, but they are all sent adult signature only.
But adult signature or specified adult signature?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Any other questions from commissioners on the delivery process? Okay, moving to a little bit of the background check process. I'm assuming you did not come up with the protocol of buying the gun and then getting the background check, and that's how it's done for whatever reason. Can you talk a little bit about the whole background check process and just how that all works, things that they're looking for, if you know, for the background check?
It's the same background check that the FBI uses. It's through the ATF database that I would have access to if I were to get my license. You can do it 24 hours a day, and it usually takes between 15 and 45 minutes, depending on the person or how busy they are.
And during that 15 to 45 minutes, are you and the client just kind of hanging out, or do you ask them to come back if it's taking a while, or?
They wait.
And what's the timeline? You said sometimes if you have like a similar name or similar social security number, something, you know, wonky can happen and it just takes a couple days. How do you know, like, what's the timeline of you knowing that information, and then do you contact them once you have the approval to come back, or how does that process work?
That usually takes 3 days. And if it's not cleared up through the ATF, then I have permission to release the firearm to them after 3 days. I would contact them to come back.
Okay.
Amanda, I have a question.
Mr. Pena?
If someone comes in to purchase a gun and they get a background check, is that background check good for a certain amount of time? And if you buy a gun 2 weeks later, do you have to get another background check? So I guess the question is, do you get a background check for every time you purchase a gun and pick it up?
Yes, I would do a background check every time, even if it's the same client.
Okay.
And is that just because your policy, or is that a law or a rule that
I believe it's both. Yeah, it's the law. I mean, something that would be logged into my the ATF book that would be constantly audited.
Okay. And can you do a little bit of education for everyone on, there was a question about when does it become basically what you're doing now with just the background check and this basic home service versus being a gun store? I'm assuming inventory is involved with a gun store versus what you're doing, but are there different licenses involved? Can you talk a little bit about the difference?
I'm not sure I understand the question about different licenses.
Like right now, I believe you said it was C1 you're going for, which is basically just doing background checks, but would you have to apply for a different sort of license to be able to have like a gun store with inventory, and, or is it the same license?
It's the same license. It's the same FFL license that a gun store carries.
So then, Mr. Fink, can you talk to the distinguishing factor then between what we're doing here with the home occupation versus when it would have to come back for a gun store?
If she were to operate her home occupation outside of the terms and conditions that she's laid out in her application, we would bring that back to the Planning Commission to determine if she has exceeded the use that she said she would have. Alternatively, if it was determined that more than half of her that the primary use of the property was for gun sales and not as a residential space, that would also be a clear violation. That would be a separate zoning issue that would not have to come back in front of the Planning Commission. Most likely, we would notice before it tripped over to that level, but both ways could come back.
Okay. I have a follow-up on that for Mr. Fink.
Go ahead,
Mr. Fink, so if we were to approve this today, would Ms. West then, let's say Ms. West decides to provide this service off-site in addition to what she's doing at home, could she, for instance, provide this background checking service at a gun show or sell weapons at a gun show? Would that be a problem for what we're approving today? Would that be different?
If she is conducting background checks at a gun show that's outside the city of Kent, that would be outside our purview.
Okay.
Amanda, can I jump back to the delivery real quick? Because I did a couple of real quick searches.
Please.
Just to try to answer some questions. It looks like the guns can be shipped via USPS, UPS, and FedEx. There is special labeling that needs to go in every package to signify that it is a firearm, and adult signature is required. Nowhere did I find it, granted this is a quick 5-minute Google search, but nowhere did I find that there had to be a matching identification for the adult mentioned on the package. Just an adult signature is all I could see. And like I said, that was just a quick Google search through the carrier websites, but there was nothing that specified that there needed to be identification provided to sign for the package. Just to clear that up. And again, that was just my quick search through the carrier websites.
Thank you, Mr. Clapper. There were concerns about the driveway trade-off if there, was an individual who wasn't able to go into the home. That'll be something that we'll talk about during discussion. Ms. West, did you want to address that at all?
Yeah, I think I heard somebody say that it might be breaking a violation if it were to be done in the driveway, because that might be part of my yard, but actually the person's car is their property according to Ohio law. So I don't think that would be relevant to me if I perform the transaction in their car.
Would you be walking across your yard to take it to their car?
Yes, just the same as they would be carrying out if they were coming in to take it.
Mr. Fink, can you speak to that at all?
That's a factual decision that the planning commission as a quasi judicial board would have to make.
Okay, thank you. Talked about the delivery vehicle. Ms. West, I believe I read maybe in your application, maybe when I was doing research, did you have to contact or speak with the Kent Police Department in regards to your application?
I am required to send them a copy of my FFL application if and when I do apply. But I believe that Chief Shearer signed off on his portion of the paperwork for the city, that there were no issues.
Madam Chair, may I clarify?
Please.
He signed off with regards to the licensing. The issues with zoning are outside the purview of the police department. So that would not be specific to the home occupation, but specifically to the license only.
Thank you. And then can you speak to a little bit about, there were some questions in regards to other FFLs in the area. Are there any that you know of? Would people be coming from other communities into Kent to obtain your service? So I'll start with those.
I believe there are about 7 FFL dealers just in the 5-mile radius. Some of them are stores, some of them are private, but most of them are near residential areas or schools or other houses or whatever. I don't believe it really makes a difference where this business is located because I'm gonna have the same level of security no matter where I go. And yes, people can come from anywhere if they want in Ohio.
All right. And are you employed by the ATF or any other organization?
No.
And or why did you decide to do this?
I am not an employee of the ATF, but I decided to do this because my family is very passionate about responsible gun ownership, and we're very knowledgeable about it. And with gun sales being up 300%, it's just a smart decision for us.
And then
Follow up to that, Amanda.
Mr. Clapper.
Yeah, maybe just not to say that you're a federal employer agent, but could I consider it, and this is the best analogy I can come up with, is like a notary public, acts as an agent of the state. You're doing a service for the state, you're licensed by, and you're able to conduct business and verify for them. So would you think that would be a fair analysis or fair equation to what you're doing? You're handling a step in the process for the federal government. So, and I'm not sure, Mr. Fink, maybe you could figure out what the exact term I'm looking for here is, but are you acting as a federal agent or in this process, I guess, and who does that accountability fall back on? If you apply for this license and are acting as this agent to conduct this background check, does that give you any kind of liability going forward?
I would be representing the ATF, but I would not be an employee of the ATF. They wouldn't be paying me or anything, but they would be constantly auditing me. And if any little thing were to be wrong or logged incorrectly, they would take my license.
Okay, I'll have some more follow-ups to that going down. Let's get through all the public ones. I'm sorry to interrupt there.
That's okay. The last one I have jotted down is, why did you choose to do it out of your home versus another location? And can you talk a little bit about why you have the hours you've chosen?
The hours are because I have a full-time day job. This is just going to be a side job for a little bit of extra money. So it's not really feasible or necessary for me to have a whole separate office space. I believe the closest commercial properties to me is only 5 blocks away, so I don't think it would be any safer, or there's not really any better reason to go there.
All right, and then commissioners, do you have any follow-up questions for Ms. West before we go to discussion?
I'll wait for discussion.
Amanda, I guess I just want to remind all the commissioners too, like Eric and Bridget said at the beginning, that our goal really is to talk about the code and the site plan. I think we are getting off topic with some of these issues, so I'll just mention that.
Thank you, Mr. Bruder. Yes, I wanted to be able to give the public some answers to some of their questions. Not all of them are necessarily germane to the site plan or the conditional zoning certificate, but I do want to allow everyone to be heard. So now that that is done, we will move forward to Planning Commission discussion. Mr. Bruder, do you want to start?
It appears to me, based on the information that we have from the city and the regulations in front of us, that there is no way to deny this and cite a specific chapter in the code that I'm aware of. And that's the only comment I have.
All right, I'm going to go through the two, main sections that we need to just topic by line, and then we can do discussion during that, because I think we're going to keep coming back to it. So for the conditional zoning certificate basis of determination, the general standards we have to follow shall be harmonious with and in accordance with the general objectives or with any specific objective of land use and thoroughfare plan. Is there any discussion on that?
I mean, so what are we saying here, that the objective in this area is to be a residential area? Because, I mean, obviously you can't use that, because then anybody who ever wants to have a home occupation ever, that one's I think we automatically move past that.
Right, and I believe, and if staff wants to speak, I believe that's more for the thoroughfare plan.
Right. This has to do with the thoroughfare plan, and it's not interfering with the thoroughfare plan, in my opinion.
Number 2 shall be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained as to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and that such use shall not change the essential character of the area. Any comment?
The applicant has shown us nothing to make physical changes. So again, not an issue.
Number 3 shall not be hazardous or disturbing to existing or future neighboring uses. Number 4.
This is where I have questions about the traffic. So when you say disturbing, to existing or future uses, this is where I ask if the traffic comes into play. Because we received I had accounts for traffic of 13, and I think Amanda, you had said earlier 16 individuals who had referenced it in their correspondence with us, saying I have concerns about parking and or traffic and the flow, ingress versus egress. What we've discussed tonight when talking about, and I can't remember which individual has made the comment, but the fact that when someone's coming in and going out, we're looking at, person comes in to make a delivery, person leaves, that's one in, one out. Person comes in to pick it up, person leaves, it's another in and an out. You're looking at a very confined space. You're looking at a very confined neighborhood. I think one of the arguments can be made in this piece is that you are affecting the harmony and you're affecting the ability for individuals to effectively navigate that area due to the traffic flow.
Can I just clarify that the deliveries do not come in the driveway? They park out front. FedEx parks out front. So there's nobody coming in and out at the same time.
But you already said.
Miss Malucci, I'm sorry, public comment is closed.
I'm sorry, but she already said there's
Miss
not going to be
Malucci,
anybody.
public comment is closed this evening. Ms. West, we're going to do our discussion, and then if someone has a question, we'll have you unmute, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Clevenger Morris, I would say that that discussion is going to be for standard number 6, which is the vehicular approaches and traffic. But
Fair.
Unless you're considering that hazardous and disturbing.
My only concern is one of the individuals earlier, it was one of the individuals later to speak, and I didn't get the name. I had mentioned that this is a very family-oriented neighborhood that has a lot of children who play and a lot of children in the area. My concern is the traffic potentially being a hazard to them if there are a lot of people coming in and out on a consistent basis. With that being said, I think the traffic concerns will be better addressed in section 6.
Okay. Number 3 shall not be detrimental to the property in the immediate vicinity or to the community as a whole.
That is number 4.
Wait, you missed
I'm sorry, number 4.
Amanda.
We did number 3 shall not be hazardous or disturbing to existing or future neighboring uses.
Okay.
Any comment? Okay. Then number 4 was shall not be detrimental to property in the immediate vicinity or to the community as a whole.
I think there could be maybe a case made here. You could go as far as to say that if people are renting, and grant it's their property, they own it, and they lease it out to a tenant of their choice, but there are neighboring properties. If those properties had trouble renting because of what was going on there and people's opinions about what went on there, I could see that maybe being detrimental as a possibility. At the same time, throughout this whole discussion, and I'm not a gun person myself, I've never owned a gun. I think responsible gun owners are fine and irresponsible gun owners aren't, but the process is being vilified a lot, where I think that we need to consider both sides here, where some people feel safer with a gun and feel that their neighborhood is safer with a gun. Some people don't. And I think that opinion, the opinion is shared by most people in the neighborhood, which I think we need to consider. But I think that maybe it was a poor reflection on Ms. West's advocacy for the Second Amendment and her feeling that maybe she is safer with a gun. And I think that we need to make sure that we're seeing things from her point of view as well, and be very fair in our decisions going forward.
I would say, well, looking at both sides, there's going to be no signage. This isn't an advertised use. So when we're talking about renting properties and whatnot, nobody's really going to know what she's doing inside of her home 6 months down the road from now.
Well, I'm assuming
unless they're Googling her address.
somewhere. There is a registry of FFL dealers, so it's going to
Right,
be
unless you Google her address. But how many times have you gone to rent a property and gone to the FFL to see if there's a dealer by? I don't know. I'm just saying.
Well,
I'm not
zero.
saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying.
And I wasn't saying it was something that was going to totally happen, but it is a possibility that if like, oh, I don't want to live in this apartment because whatever goes on next door, whether, you know, whether she's selling essential oils or selling guns, whatever you don't agree with that goes next door, maybe that makes people not want to live next to it. So it was just opening it up to a possibility.
Understood. Anything else on detrimental to property in the immediate vicinity or community? Hearing none, we'll go on to number 5, shall be served adequately by public facilities and services. I don't think there's going to be any discussion on that. Number 6, shall have vehicular approaches to the property, which will be designed as not to create an interference with traffic on surrounding public streets or roads. And that's Mr. Clevenger Morris. Your comment.
And I think this goes back to my earlier comment in that, not the last one, the one like 4 comments before, when we talked about, I had asked the applicant about people parking on another street based off of a correspondence that we had received. And she had basically said there's legal street parking. And yes, while there is in fact legal street parking on other streets, if your lot is full and your business is causing someone to park on the next street over, you're not providing ample parking. If for some reason you have family in and you have someone scheduled to do a pickup and a slot, and you don't have parking because you have 2 family members in and they're parking somewhere else, you're not providing ample parking for that to happen. I think there is limited parking in this space. I think it's going to be difficult to maintain. I think it creates a dangerous environment for the children in the neighborhood if there are people coming in and out on a more regular basis than they're used to. And I think it is impossible to say today that you can guarantee that there will always be space there, especially if you're talking about doing 25 of these in a day, or 25 of these in a week rather. I don't see you always having those spaces. You can't control your neighbors, you can't control the other tenants. And I think there are going to be times when it overlaps, there aren't those spaces, and it is the responsibility of the business to guarantee that.
That is the entire purpose of having it by appointment only.
I'm sorry, ma'am, you cannot comment at this time.
Well,
Okay, so Mr. Morris, for parking, but for number 6 for traffic, do you have concerns about traffic?
I think the traffic is the second part of that. I think the traffic flowing in and out of that driveway is a potential hazard for the kids who are playing that they referenced earlier. Someone, it was like the 5th person before we ended public discussion, referenced the children playing on the sidewalks and the yards in that area and it being a concern for them. So I wanted to reiterate that concern here.
Okay. Any other concerns about traffic or vehicular approaches?
Yes, I think you have to take into account that this is a public street. And there is a right to run a business out of this particular property with conditional uses, meeting the conditions. If someone's having a party at their house, regardless of where they may live in the city, there's probably times when people are parking at legitimate, legal parking areas on public streets. So I don't know if that's I can't see that as being something that's detrimental. Now, as far as more traffic, I don't really, traffic is always an issue in everything that comes before us. In most cases, I would say that sometimes it is an issue. In this case, I would say it could be an issue. And it could be an issue for the simple reason of a delivery every day. But I'll also go to say that there's an Amazon truck on my street 3 times a day, virtually every day, making a delivery. That's not going to go away. Okay. So it's part of our life that Amazon is down every single street in the city of Kent every day. My neighborhood, for some reason, it seems like they're there 3 times a day. And one of those 3 times they're stopping at my house. So that's more traffic. And they always park in the street. And a lot of times they park on the side of the street that says no parking. So I don't know what the difference is on West Main Street. The only good thing about West Main Street is, yes, there is a bike lane there, but yes, it's also wider and traffic can probably negotiate a little better. But I think there's other delivery vehicles that are there virtually every day, if not more often than once. So could it be an issue? Yes, but I don't think it's an issue any different than in most of the neighborhoods, in every neighborhood in Kent. That's all I have to say about that for right now.
Okay. You know, I was thinking for the traffic as well, there is a funeral home a couple doors down. Some people have smaller funerals than others. I don't think the traffic on the road from this is going to create any bigger problem. And there's people dying every day, and some families are bigger than others going to the funeral home and leaving the funeral home. So I don't think, you know, a couple cars a day is not going to drastically change the traffic in that vicinity. I do also need to say that for the chat, I cannot talk or address any of the comments coming through on chat. They're not on public record. So I am ignoring those. Just a heads up, I'm not able to communicate via chat with anyone. So those were the basis of determination 110705, general standards. And then the other chapter we have is the 11710119. A is that such uses shall be conducted entirely within the dwelling and no use of accessory buildings or yard space shall be permitted. Any discussion?
I find that based on the statement made in her letter that states, this will provide a discrete local place for consumers to pick up their merchandise that they have ordered online. I'm sorry, wrong sentence. I'm sorry. If I have a disabled customer, they do not need to get out of the car, I will come to them. I would definitely find that in violation of, or not in accordance with 11710119A.
I would also have concerns because I asked the applicant about making adjustments for that very reason and becoming ADA compliant in the space to avoid that and to allow the individuals to come in. And as of that moment, it didn't seem to be an intention. That could change. But at this point in time, if we are going to allow individuals to come and go from a business, we want to make sure that business is ADA compliant so that if someone who is limited in mobility would like to purchase a firearm and it's happening legally, they have the same rights to do so as everyone else.
I would say that whether or not a ramp would need to be installed to make it ADA compliant would be out of our purview, and that's the building official in his review. And if he says that she has to install it, then she can't operate her business if she chooses not to. So I would say that it wouldn't be her choice at that point.
I would challenge that notion and that we have conditionally added ADA compliance in the past previously this year. And I think Mr. Fink can comment on that.
Yeah, if staff could comment, because I believe that they had stated that a ramp needed to be installed. And since we already knew that, that's why we made it a conditional. Ms. Dussel?
Regardless of the circumstance, the Planning Commission always has the authority on a condition permitted use to add the conditions it sees necessary to fulfill this obligation. So if you believe that ADA compliance is essential to, as part of your basis of determination, you may add that as a condition.
Okay, well, specifically, based on the statement in her letter and based on 11710119A, I think there is a conflict there. And I think we just leave it at that there is a conflict there and that condition isn't met at this point.
Okay. Condition B, such uses shall be clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling for dwelling purposes. C, such use shall be conducted only by persons residing in the dwelling and not more than one person, or not more than one other person. D, there shall be no display nor stock in trade nor commodities sold except those which are produced on the premises. E, the use shall not involve the use of more than 33 1/3% of the floor area of only one story. F,
I have a
one,
question about that one.
Mr. Clevenger Morris.
So if individuals are coming into the home and it's my understanding that they're meeting in the kitchen, but the business is housing the gun safe and materials in the basement, you're utilizing 2 floors. Like I would pick one. In the letter, I believe she had referenced that there was a separate entrance for the basement. I would say if I don't believe that it's in line with those conditions at that point, because you're not using 25% of one floor. You're using 2 floors in multiple pieces. So I would say it would need to be one or the other.
Okay. Any other comments? F, only one unlit nameplate, not more than 1 square foot in area, announcing the name of the home occupation should be permitted. And then G, such use shall not create a nuisance by reason of noise, odor, dust, vibration, fumes, smoke, electrical interference, or other causes.
I think Mr. Pano's trying to speak and he's muted.
Mr. Pano?
You can't mute me. Okay. I'd like to go back to E and what Chris was talking about. And I guess I'd address this almost to Eric, because I think we did have a conflict between 1/3 and 1/4 of the floor area in another section of the code. So I want to get I want to find out what square footage or what percentage of the unit can be designated for the home occupation.
Under 1119.05C.
Right, and that's the one I've been looking at, I think. No, 11,
Yeah.
yeah.
That is the more restrictive requirement, and so that's the requirement we go by. When anytime the City of Kent Code has a conflict, we go by the more restrictive version. The total floor area of the home to be utilized for home occupation should not exceed more than 25% of the entire floor area of the structure. For the purposes of calculating the total floor area, only the main living area of the home shall be counted. Garages, as well as unfinished basements or attic areas, shall not be counted towards the total floor area. In situations where 2 or more dwelling units are attached, the calculation of the total floor area should be limited to the area of the dwelling unit in which the operation will be located.
So that's different than what's stated here on the staff report as far as 33% of the floor area of only 1 story.
I said, this is a separate condition. This is what's listed under 1171. So Ms. Barone properly brought in what's under 1171. We're also saying, though, that this is in conflict with 1119.05C. And
She would
they
have to meet both
conditions.
So, and if she has to meet both conditions, there's also an issue not just with the multiple floor usages, but also with the space. Because then I'm looking at the hand-drawn piece here that we received in our packet, and you're looking at, this is 50%. The kitchen is 50% of the first floor. So in the one condition alone, it's more than 33% of one floor. And then I guess you can make an argument that it's probably not 25% of the entire building itself. But then we also received, I don't have measurements here for the basement, and I would need more information on what we're doing with the basement, but we received pictures of a recently refinished basement to be used for these purposes.
Looks like 15 by 12 on that, Chris. And if you put the 2 spaces together, you're at 352.5 square feet out of 1,024? Or is it right, 1,024 per unit? Is that what I'm looking at here? Is that an upstairs, downstairs?
Does unfinished basement, he's the finished basement.
I'm just looking on the property record card from the county listed as 1,024 square feet on the first floor and 1,024 on the second floor. I know that's a duplex. So is that an upstairs, downstairs unit or apartment?
They look to be side by side from the photos, but that would need to be confirmed.
Want me to
You could address that.
Yeah, Ms. West, if you could address that.
It is a side-by-side apartment and each side has a basement and then 2 floors. And the reason there's a picture of the basement is because I was originally asking to use that as the office space, and then I was told it could not be in a basement.
Okay.
So we moved it to upstairs, and I'm not using the whole kitchen or even half the kitchen. My office space is a laptop and a chair.
I understand.
Yes, the safe is kept on a separate floor for a safety issue. I'm not going to have the safe in the same room as my clients.
Sure, and that safe is stored in that, I see the electronic lock on the door. Is that safe then stored in that office space in the basement?
The safe is in the basement.
Okay, thank you.
So my question, I guess, is then who determines the square footage of Ms. West's unit and how much space is actually being used? And is it less than the allowable space?
Our calculation would put it at less than that 25%. She's using the kitchen table.
Okay, so what I guess I'm asking is, has staff made a determination that they meet the requirement of 111905.6 and also 1171.01 E, 19E?
They make the final determination.
Yeah.
So staff is making an initial determination. Planning Commission makes the final determination. That's in the city of Kent. We are governed by citizen boards. We make the statements, but the staff tries to gather information for you. The Planning Commission, in this case, makes the final decision.
Great.
Anything else, Mr. Pena?
Not right this moment, thank you.
Okay. So I've read through both chapters. Any further discussion? Mr. Clevenger Morris, do you have anything else to say?
Not at this time.
Mr. Bruder?
I do not, thank you.
Mr. Clapper?
Yeah, just want to share a story that happened to me last week and how it would equate to this. And when we were talking about delivery, I had ordered a rather expensive package. I got an email that said it was going to be delivered that day. I had an appointment for 30 minutes in the afternoon. It did say on the email that signature would be required. So I came back from my appointment 30 minutes later, and this very expensive package is sitting on my front porch. And there was nobody here to sign for it. And I would hope that the carriers, all that with the packages requiring the labels they are for firearms, would at least not leave a firearm on a porch. But I'm also not thinking it's outside of the realm of possibility. Knowing how these delivery people work, especially through the holidays, you know, whether or not there's a signature required, it happened to me on this occasion. It's happened to me before where a package has been left. I've never ordered a firearm, so I don't know if that would be the case or how frequent that happens, but I guess I wouldn't say it's outside of the realm of possibility. And how that would apply at 110705.3, you know, whether that is hazardous to the existing uses of a neighborhood, if there is a gun left on a porch. And again, it's a possibility, but I think it's something that we need to consider.
Mr. Pena?
I'm good for right now.
I've also have no further questions. Is there any further discussion?
I think to Mr. Clapper's point, I mean, if you go down that line of thinking, there are a lot of places you can go. You can make the argument that, inherently someone could break into the home and gain access to weapons, which I don't support that thought process, because someone could break into my home and take the iMac that I'm using right now. At the same time, there are other small pieces that go into it. Could I potentially walk onto Miss West's porch and find for a package? What if a package comes a day early and someone intercepts it? I think the mail piece is a serious concern. It comes down to the company that Miss West would herself choose to keep, even. And that's not to make any type of judgment call for you, Miss West, but if you were friends with someone who had negative intentions, they could potentially attempt to take advantage of you and gain access to firearms. There are a lot of what ifs in the air. I think for me, my two biggest concerns in all of this aren't necessarily the what ifs, it's the addressing the issue with potentially taking firearms outside, because that is just not going to happen. If someone has a disability, you have to find a way to facilitate that transaction without taking a firearm outside, because it creates too much of an inherent risk, in my opinion. And I think, as Mr. Clapper said, the mail creates another inherent risk to the safety and harmony of that neighborhood.
Well, I'd like to comment on that. And the comment is, it says such use shall be conducted entirely within the dwelling unit, and no use of the accessory building or yard space shall be permitted. So the question becomes, this is almost like a two-pronged question. If an able-bodied person goes to pick up the gun that they purchased, they're going to go inside, get checked. If they pass their whatever it's called, then they're going to walk out the door carrying a gun, whether it's a pistol or what, I don't know. So the fact that the gun is going to be outside in the yard, that's a foregone conclusion. They're going to get it, put it in their car and drive away. Now, as far as someone that may require handicapped accessibility, well, then that's an issue that I think has to be taken up with, one, the building department, and is that required? Okay, and that's the condition that we can add to this if we so see that it's necessary. But I think I look at this from a zoning point of view. Okay, so you have to meet all the conditions that are set forth, that are written down in our zoning code. And if there are certain things in the zoning code that would preclude this business from operating for any reason, then I think we need to make that point perfectly clear and come up with a reason and a section in the code that says so. That's all I'm going to say for right now.
I'm going to just go off Mr. Pano for a minute here and say that the firearm going up to the front porch with the delivery driver in a box is going to be no different than Ms. West walking out with the firearm in a box and handing it to the person in the car. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying there's no difference between it going to the front door or out the back door. My other thought is that we would not be having this discussion if we were talking about Tupperware. If there was someone who wasn't accessible to be able to go into the house, she would be very kind to walk the Tupperware out to the car. But being that this is a firearm in a box, I think the argument's different.
I
think that we have building officials that will make the proper call there on whether or not they feel that type of business needs any, improvements. And that's my thought on that.
I'm going to quickly agree with you and Peter's line of thinking on that. the line in the code from 11710119A says that the business should be conducted entirely with inside the dwelling unit. If that happens, then once that person walks out there with a gun, they're just a gun owner walking down the street. So the business is concluded. If that business happens in the driveway, that's business happening in the driveway. I think that you can look at them as two different things. There's business being conducted in the driveway as far as information being passed. The customer at this point is sitting in the car. She's gone back inside to make the background check and check on the proper requirements, bring the gun out, give it to the customer. I think that's a different process than the customer going inside, doing everything that needs to be done, and just walking out of a facility as a legal gun owner. I think the same could be said if I was buying beer somewhere. I don't think somebody can walk it out to my car and hand it to me without, that's selling it in the parking lot rather than me going in, them verifying my ID, and then me buying it. So
Well, sure, you can go and get,
argument.
you can get curbside alcohol now.
Right, and there's a
Out to your car.
verification process. I guess that may have been a bad example because that is starting to happen now. But I think that we can make the argument that they're two different things. There's business being conducted inside, at which point the transaction is complete and the customer walks out. There's business being conducted outside. And this says that the code says such use shall be conducted entirely within the dwelling unit. So I guess it's how you want to interpret it. The way I interpret it is that if the transactions are happening in the driveway, then the business isn't being conducted entirely within the dwelling unit.
Can I speak to that?
Yes, Ms. West, go ahead.
The business would actually be taking place inside the house. Them handing me the form in the driveway, there's no different of them filling out that form, printing it online and bringing it to me.
Except for the handicapped people that
Ms.
you would.
Malucci,
close the
public
driveway.
comment is closed.
Yeah, so if a handicapped person comes, they could already have a form filled out, but the business is being conducted inside the dwelling.
Thank you, Ms. West.
So Amanda, I guess I would just offer, Jeff, if you want to make that as a condition that the transfer of the gun doesn't happen in the driveway, relative to the ADA, I think you could do that. I suspect that Ms. West could list on her document, should she choose not to be accessible, if the building department says she doesn't need to be, she would just let her clients know. They either have to make accommodations some other way if we are saying you simply can't carry the gun outside. I think we're talking about, I'm sure, a minority, a very small percentage of the transactions. And so.
Well, I think you can make that same argument for the same amount of people that walk up and down the sidewalk every day, but we're still putting in handicap access, crosswalks, and everything else. And I'm not trying to add ADA.
But that's the general public. These are specific clients with appointments. There is also something about a reasonable accommodation. I'm saying if you want to put it on there, Eric said you can.
Well, no, I'm really not looking to add any conditions. I'm just looking at line A there, and is my application of it at line A, the way I apply it 100% the way it's written, can I just say, okay, here's this, it's not in compliance. I'm not looking to add conditions. I'm just looking to like we do with everything else, you apply it fully as it's written. I mean, the Second Amendment is a very literal piece of legislature. It's an amendment. People interpret it very literally that they can own firearms. I think when it was written, there is obviously no imagination of what happened down the road and what could be happening, with firearms down the road. So, so I'm just looking at, 19A as it's written and as I see the transactions happening and where the business is happening as, it relates to that line in the code.
You didn't ask us to read through these and say, what can we do to make this work for the applicant? You asked us to read through these and say whether or not we agreed that they met the requirements as listed. I don't think it's fair to try to make it look like something it isn't. I would also just say that I don't think it's fair to make certain underlying accusations about my own personal beliefs on where guns are, because I come from a very pro-gun family and have a very pro-gun background. And I think certain individuals on this commission are making certain assumptions about my intentions. I think we had a lot of people, reach out to us with a lot of different concerns. And I think we owe it to those individuals to go through and address those concerns. And if at the end of all of this, it is for or against the issue, so long as we as a commission came to an understanding that we approved it because it's what the code said we should do, or we didn't because it's what the code said we should do, and we heard everybody out in the process. That's what I'm trying to do. But people lodging things at people and making it about something that this isn't a Second Amendment issue. This is a code issue.
Mr. Clevenger-Boris, I don't think anyone, I think everyone has been very professional. I don't think anyone has pushed their agendas in this conversation at all. I think we've done a very good job addressing and dissecting all 80, however many pieces of correspondence we had. So I'm just saying, I think everyone's been respectful. I don't think anyone thinks you're gonna vote a certain way for a certain agenda or anything like that.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion?
So I guess the last thing I would say, Amanda, is relative to transactions that happen outside, that really could be an enforcement thing too, because it's already in the code. So if Miss West starts having transactions outside, then it would come back before us if it made its way to the city via complaints.
Okay, moving on, about the stacked parking.
Thank you.
So in our staff report, and I'll just read it for those that haven't heard it, Section 116704E of the zoning code states, ingress and egress driveways should not be used to meet the requirements stated in Section 116705, minimum number of parking spaces, and thereby block the reasonable flow of vehicles to parking spaces. Parking arrangements within egress and egress driveway areas shall be approved by the Planning Commission. The proposed stack parking is within the parking space, not the ingress egress. Staff discourages stack parking so as not to impede the reasonable flow of vehicles even within a parking space. However, the zoning does not specifically address stacked parking in parking spaces. So to that effect, what's the discussion on that?
Well,
Yes. Go ahead,
Amanda.
Mr. Pena. No, go ahead.
Okay. I am looking, because this was the topic I wanted to get to next also. So if I'm looking at the site plan that's presented, it shows that there are 4 parking places, 9 foot by 18 foot, that meet the requirement of the code. There's no dimension on it, but it's shown that way. So that means each unit needs 2 parking places so that the parking that's there is adequate for the duplexes, because it's 4 spaces that are required. The visitor parking is 1 space, if I'm not mistaken, and I'd like to know if Jennifer agrees with that or not.
Mr. Pano, can you repeat that one more time, please?
Okay, from my understanding of what I've gone through with the zoning code and the parking requirements, each side of the duplex requires 2 parking places. So that would require, for that particular building at 772, 4 spaces. The site plan presented shows 4 spaces that are not in the driveway. And then for the home occupation, they would need 1 additional parking place. And I'm asking Jennifer if that's correct. If Jennifer's still here.
I'm still here. That is the way I would interpret it, that you would have to have a 4 spaces plus a space for your business.
Okay.
But what is being proposed is 1 space being stacked to leave 1 open for the client.
Well, regardless, there's 4 spaces for the occupants of the building. And then there would have to be a visitor parking, if all 4 spaces were taken, would be stacked behind one of the other cars. And from what Jeff just read and what's in the report, it's not encouraged, but it's not a deniable parking situation.
And to your last line there, Peter, that's also, you know, similar to how we were treating 1171-0119D, where there's kind of been a practice in the past on what we allow and don't allow. So maybe we should kind of go the same way with this.
And you mean what by that?
Well, I mean that line 1171-0119D stated there should be no display nor stock in trade nor commodities sold except those which are produced on the premises. I asked the question via email earlier in the week, and Bridget responded, there's been the practice to include, I'm sorry, I can't even read my own handwriting. I'm so tired. Give me a minute. Or Bridget, if you have it in front of me, maybe you can read your response to me while I look it up.
Yeah, I do have that here, I believe. Although I've got a lot of papers here. Okay, with regard to 1171.01A 19D, it has been the practice of the Community Development Department to include agents who act as vendor distributors between wholesale producers, manufacturers, and the public as being in compliance with this criteria.
Okay, so if that's been the practice to allow that, and staff has had the practice of discouraging stacked parking, my suggestion would be to not allow that in this case then.
So are you recommending, Mr. Clapper, it be denied based off of the parking, or are you recommending that one of the conditions be that the parking be expanded?
I'm recommending that that could be one of the multiple reasons to deny it.
The cars can be shuffled around so that they're unstacked for the visitors, who will be one at a time.
And that's entirely possible. I'm just going off what was presented here in front of me, so, and how we're reading it this way.
So what's your conclusion?
Well, my conclusion is that based on what's in front of me, based on the stack parking, it would not be allowed.
And that's based on what it says where in the zoning code?
I was basing that on the last line in parking in our staff report. And the last line of that is staff discourages stack parking so as not to impede reasonable flow of vehicles, even within a parking space. However, the zoning code does not specifically address stack parking in parking spaces. So it's not specifically addressed. It's been discouraged. I guess I'd continue to discourage it.
Mr. Fink, can you point to the reasonable flow of vehicles in the code, please?
Well, I think it's more of reaching the minimum number of parking spaces.
Yeah, this would be a parking. Are you referring to the that section that you read? I think that talked about or what Jen read. It's in Jen's staff report.
116705.
Yeah.
So while they discourage stacking, Jeff, what if the space designated was behind this West's car? She's not going anywhere during the transaction.
Right.
So it doesn't impede the traffic with anybody else. She has to be there.
Okay.
I mean, at the same time, what happens if the individual coming to purchase the firearm is blocking in someone else who is literally in the other half of the duplex, and now they can't back out because they've been blocked in? I think you can go either direction with that.
Right. It's just a matter of,
are they blocking the flow based off of 116705? Are they blocking the flow of those parking spaces from someone being blocked in and being able to exit appropriately?
Can they designate parking for their tenants, designate parking for their residents, and designate parking for visitors based on what we have in front of us? I guess would be more my question.
Are you asking, has it been, are you asking, has it been designated or can it be designated?
Well, okay, good point. It has not been designated on here that they have alleviated stacked parking on what's in front of me.
So that could be one of the conditions, is that the visitor has to park behind Ms. West, and she's responsible for making sure that happens when she corresponds with her clients.
Okay.
Looking at the drawing, I don't see how, even if it's stacked, it would impede the other tenants if they're stacked like in the drawing. I'm trying to think of if we've ever had cases with stacked parking that's been denied. I can't recall off the top of my head. It doesn't say in the zoning code that you can't have stacked parking, just that it's not encouraged.
Rooming houses where they were.
I think it has more to do with stacked parking in the driveway that impedes the flow of traffic in and out of the property.
Correct.
And again, it doesn't say that in the zoning code, but that goes back to my further point about 1171-0119D. It's very specific in the zoning code what it says, but there's always been a practice to allow for.
What are you talking about?
But it does, Jeff. The code does reference not blocking the reasonable flow of vehicles to parking spaces. So in 116705, it references not blocking a reasonable flow. So while it does not specifically reference the words quotation stacked parking end quote, the act itself of stacked parking blocking the flow is in and of itself still reflected in that passage.
Right, which is not, so staff discourages it. Stacked parking.
With or without staff, it's still in the code. With or without a discouragement from staff, it's discouraged by code alone.
If
whether
it blocks,
there just says not to.
The flow.
So are you saying that the parking is not correct as it's shown?
No, I'm not saying, I think Chris is saying that it's blocking the flow of traffic. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying.
Mr. Clevenger Morris, can you cite that again? It was 1167.
And I gotta find it again.
Sorry.
I just closed the screen.
1167.04E, I think is what you're referring to?
Probably. I'm reopening. My browser just shut down, so I'm trying to get it back open.
Ingress and egress driveways shall not be used to meet the requirements stated in section 1167.05, minimum number of parking spaces, and thereby block the reasonable flow of vehicles to parking spaces. Parking arrangements within ingress and egress driveway areas shall be approved by the planning commission. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
This parking area is not in the ingress egress part of the driveway.
I mean, I think we've all lived in driveways where you have 3 cars in the driveway and a 2-lane driveway, and someone's teenager has to go move the car so mom can get to work or whatever. And so one of the conditions could also be that the family that lives there has to do the stacking so that the visitor space has free access. I mean, I think that there's a way to solve it if that's a legitimate concern.
Okay, I was just
again through operations, not through paving.
If you don't have to apologize, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, thank you. You don't have to apologize for.
No, I'm just saying if we're going to
dissecting.
discourage it, let's find a way to work around it here.
I think it's not uncommon for rental units to identify parking spaces with small signs, and so we could ask her to put, unit 1, space 1, space 2, unit 2, space 1 and 2, and visitor parking, and it could be designated as stacked behind her unit as one option. But I think just identifying the parking as a signage requirement, I don't think that's too much to ask.
That's not a big ask.
Yeah.
It is designated in my rental contract. I'm not sure if that helps, but they are designated on paper. But signs would be helpful also.
Particularly for the visitors, because they're coming the first time, so they know who it's okay to park behind if they have to.
Right. I was just trying to follow up with things being the practice of and things being discouraged. If we want to keep to discourage that and try to find a way around it. But if we're good with it being stacked, then we're good with it being stacked.
It's also, if stacked parking is a concern of staff, it's something we can address during the next planning session for the future. So we can add that to the agenda to make sure that it's something we can avoid moving forward.
Is there any other further comment, discussion, or a motion?
No.
I can make a motion. I move that in case PC 20-016, the Planning Commission approve the conditional zoning certificate and site plan for home occupation to operate a firearms business at 772 West Main Street, subject to the following conditions: 1, technical plan review; 2, past inspections conducted by both the fire prevention officer and the chief building official; 3, provide evidence to the city that a federal firearms license was issued by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. And I will add 4, that parking space signage be identified for tenants, occupants, and visitors.
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to do roll call. Mr. Clevenger Morris,
No.
Mr. Bruder,
Aye.
Mr. Clapper,
No.
Miss Edwards is a yay. Mr. Pano,
Yes.
motion carries 3-2. All right. Moving on to meeting minutes.
I move to approve the previous outstanding meeting minutes for both meetings as presented.
It's the meeting minutes for October 20th, 2020 and October 27th, 2020. Any edits?
Nope.
And that was
I'll
by Mr.
second.
Clevenger, second by Mr. Bruder. Moved to second. And any further discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0.
Do we have a meeting, any more meetings this year?
Yes. Not the first meeting in December, but the second meeting will be, we will have we're redoing the conditional chapter, and do we have a case? Nope. It'll be a work session. We've been working on redoing the condition chapter.
Is that
So
what
we'll
we
be going
did
over that.
a week or two ago?
Yes, we've been redoing it.
Okay.
Do you also want to look into with the consultants on if the city wants to pursue stacked parking as an issue, what we would need to change to address that in the next set of updates?
We actually have that on our list. It's actually, I think, already been looked at. Isn't it in there? I think we
assuming
already
after
addressed it in our
tonight.
I think we already addressed it in our parking chapter draft.
And
But we
after
will
tonight, I'm
verify.
assuming we'll look at where firearm businesses can be located within the city. Is that
Correct.
going to be on discussion or on the agenda?
The specific type of retail, is that what you're referring? Oh, like the type of retail business, we actually have it called business retail, which would include the different zoning districts where that would be allowed.
Okay.
We actually just looked at that today.
Okay.
I would also like to change everything back and re-include Devil Strip, but we can have that discussion a different day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Yes, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.